Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us at the 2022 Sundance Film Festival, where you've just watched the world premiere of Watcher by Chloe Okuno. I'm Heidi Zwicker. I'm one of the senior programmers here at Sundance, and I'm thrilled to be moderating a Q&A with Chloe and some of the team from Watcher. But first, I would like to thank our ASL interpreter for this screening, Rory. Thanks for joining us, Rory. And I would like to remind all of you in the audience of the chat function on the side of your screen, which you can use to discuss the film with your fellow audience members, as well as the Q&A function just beside it, which is where you should submit your questions about the film you've just watched. We would love to hear from you. Also, thank you for doing your part to foster conversations that are welcoming to all and abide by our community agreement. This includes treating moderators, artists, and your fellow audience members with respect. Okay, now let's start the Q&A. I am very pleased to introduce the director of Watcher, Chloe Okuno.
Hello.
Hi, Chloe. And I know that you're joined by two of the terrific actors in the film, Maika Monroe and Carl Glusman. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
So I think we can jump right into the Q&A. I'm going to start things off with the first few questions. Chloe, the premise of this film feels almost deceptively simple, but then we're so immersed in Julia's experience that it becomes so rich and compelling and terrifying. I would love to know what you saw when you first encountered this script, this story that sparked your interest in making this your feature debut.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it was that. It was the simplicity of it and the minimalism of it. And I felt there was something very cool about taking a story that in many ways we've seen, many times before, and it's been done by these truly incredible filmmakers. But I still feel like, the sort of true psychological thriller where we're 100% in the head of our protagonist is just a very interesting genre for a filmmaker. How do I show visually what Julia is feeling? How do we tell that story in a way where the emotions are told through the filmmaking and you're sort of bringing people into her interior life? I just felt like there were things about that kind of story and being a woman and feeling like you're not believed and feeling like you're sort of constantly doubted and maybe slightly patronized by the men around you that I felt was, a thing that a lot of women have experienced. Certainly I've experienced at times in my life. And I just felt like it was something that I could speak to. And there is a sort of anger and frustration there that, Maika captured so beautifully. So.
Absolutely. You mentioned that this film took 6 years to make. Can you tell us a little bit about the sort of long road it took to get to the place where you could make this movie? I'm sure the pandemic didn't help.
Yeah, so I think doing the math, I'm slightly incorrect. It was 5 years. I'm adding an extra year for the pandemic because it just feels longer. But I got hired to do the movie in 2017, I believe. And it was actually in kind of a fairly classic way. I read the script, I heard that they were hiring directors and that they were hearing pitches from a handful of people. And I was very motivated to get hired because I felt like I would never work again in the business if I didn't land a job soon. And I also, felt like the script was so interesting. So I went in and I just did like a crazy 30-page presentation. I like to say that it was like my Reese Witherspoon in election moment, just trying really, really hard. And I guess the producers felt bad enough that they hired me.
Maika and Carl, you're both incredible in the film. I would love to know how you first became involved with the project and what interested you about these characters.
Carl?
I'll start. Yeah. I came on a little after Maika, I believe. There was only a couple weeks before production was going to start, but my agent sent me the script. I read it. There was something about it that reminded me of a Nicholas Roeg film, and then there was this added challenge of learning some Romanian dialogue, which wasn't easy, but I was up for the challenge, and that was rewarding and terrifying all at the same time.
And Maika?
Yeah, well, I saw Chloe's short Slut probably 6 months before being sent the feature before it. I mean, yeah, I just was obsessed with the short and was like, who did this? And then yeah, 6 months later I got sent this email about this film being made kind of soon, and I just looked and I saw Chloe's name and I was like, oh my God, no way. I'm like, I just hope that this script is good and that I love it, because yeah, I was such a fan, and I read it and immediately related so deeply to Julia, and then pretty quickly after that met with Chloe and we just hit it off, and yeah, rest is history.
Awesome. I'd love to ask you, Chloe, about the visual language of the film. Something I think you do so extraordinarily well is create a sense of dread on screen, not just when Julia is walking down the dark street, but in her own apartment, in a grocery store. Like, you still create such a compelling sense of dread. Can you talk about making that feeling happen on screen?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I was looking at the work of a lot of incredible filmmakers. I was looking at, Rosemary's Baby. I was looking at Seven by David Fincher, and a movie called Perfect Blue by Satoshi Kon. And even of course, some non-genre movies as well, like Three Colors Blue by Krzysztof Kieslowski. And I think what I wanted to do was try to build a language where you're able to use, lensing and composition and color to kind of slowly make the world around Julia feel a little bit more frightening and oppressive and claustrophobic. Or even it's sort of like paradoxically like the claustrophobia of her being tiny in these really massive spaces and just feeling really isolated and alone. And even we worked on doing things like, by the way, these are all like structures, but sometimes you break them. So don't go looking for this as like some kind of hard and fast rules. But I will say, like, talking to the production designer and my DP, certainly we had like a very specific color palette we were working with. We designed Maika's clothes so that towards the end of the movie, she was kind of blending into her environment, like she wanted to physically disappear. We tried to shoot her on a longer focal length in the beginning and then move toward wider lenses. So it seems like the camera's physically getting closer to her as it feels like the watcher is physically getting closer to her. And, we played with centering her a little bit more. So again, everything feels like he, as this presence, is focusing in on her to a point that is, hopefully really frightening.
Let's go to some of the questions we have from the audience. Houston says, the sound design is the best I've heard in a film in a while. What was done to create this tense atmosphere through sound?
Yeah, I have to give a massive shout out to both my editor, Michael Block, and to our sound designer, Fred Dubois, both of whom are brilliant. And I mean, like everything in this movie, I think we were trying to capture what Julia is feeling. And the challenge for us, I think, was this is a movie in which a lot of times we're trying to play with the sound of silence. It's a lot of her just in quiet rooms. And what is that like? And how do you do that, but also build a sense of dread? So I think, when she would move into spaces that felt a little more dangerous when we got deeper into the movie, we would try to bring in sounds of like arguments in the background really subtly, or like sirens to suggest that like there's a crime happening. There's sort of this subconscious, sign of danger. And then, of course, obviously, even things like ADR and breathing and just making sure you're always focused on Julia and what she's feeling. I think it was all about that. But yeah, really, I think a lot of that work is due to the sheer brilliance of Fred and Michael.
We have a question from Maika. Your performance in the film was incredible, especially in that final scene. I would really love to know what helps you draw out that amount of emotion take after take.
Oh, I don't know. Man, Uh,
What's your secret, Micah?
what is it? I don't know. I mean, I guess going into a scene that I know is going to be emotionally challenging, I have to be ready to do it over and over again. And I feel like that's something that I've learned over the years, and I didn't maybe realize in the beginning. You know, I'd kind of give it my all, and then yeah, doing it over and over again is quite challenging. But I don't know. It's I don't know. I don't know. I guess a lot has to do with the other actor and Chloe, and making an environment that is like really safe, and a space that I can like kind of stay in the right mind frame. And yeah, that was something that wasn't hard on this set. Kind of everyone knew what we were going into, the scene that we were shooting, and yeah, everyone kind of like, we're like, okay, we're gonna do this. And yeah, so
Carl, how did you approach your character? I mean, I think, you know, he's not a horrible person or a horrible husband, but as in the audience, it's so frustrating to see him not believe her. So like, can you talk about like how you approach like inhabiting that character, knowing the audience might receive him in a different way than you had to see him?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I didn't have a too dissimilar experience myself watching the movie last night. I find it very frustrating to watch Francis, partly because some of his errors are ones that I've made in my own past in relationships where, because, you know, like you said, he's not an evil or malicious guy, but sometimes in relationships, guys, I find, not only guys, but often guys have a tendency to try to fix things when they feel like things are in disarray. Um, and I have made the mistake myself of trying to minimize my partner's experience instead of just listening and trying to feel into what they're going through, because you can't always fix something. Sometimes it's best to just listen. So as far as approaching my character, it was pretty easy to draw on some personal experiences, which I was definitely reminded of when watching the movie. But also, I mean, my biggest challenge, because every role is sort of a different puzzle. You know, there'll be different challenge, or at least that's the sort of thing that I look for when it comes to picking or selecting jobs. And this one had the added difficulty of speaking some dialogue in Romanian, which is not a language that I've ever even heard, I believe, spoken out loud before. It sounded like Russian with, or it sounded like Italian with a Russian accent to me. And that was not easy. That definitely gave me a bit of a panic attack. So I drilled that stuff over and over again every day until we started shooting it. Yeah, that was my big approach. So, yeah.
We have a question about another actor who gives a terrific performance in the film who's not here now. Anola Leon says, it was exciting to see Bern Gorman as the mysterious stranger. He's a stunning character actor. How did that casting come about? He seems the perfect person to play the role.
Oh, I love Bern Gorman. He's an incredible actor, and he's a really wonderful person. And yeah, so essentially we were in Bucharest in pre-production casting the movie, and casting every role, including that of the Watcher. And I think his manager maybe reached out to us and suggested Bern. And it was just like, oh my God, of course. Like, how did I not think of Bern Gorman? He'd be the perfect person for this. I've always been such a big fan of his. And then I met him, and he immediately understood the character, just like on a cellular level. He understood the sort of like delicacy of him, and also the fact that, of course for him, I'm sure for Byrne, I don't want to speak for him, but I would imagine that even though he's, potentially a villainous character, he has his own inner life, and he feels like his motivations are pure to him and what he's doing. And he just had a really fascinating backstory in his mind, that was sort of based in the history of Romania. And yeah, I mean, when he showed up on set, it was so interesting because, like, for the first few weeks of shooting, the first week at least, everything Byrne was doing was totally nonverbal. It was just him, like, following Maika through the supermarket or through the streets of Bucharest. But even that, he did it in such an interesting way. He had like this really specific way of walking. And I almost feel like he's so good at it, you just think that that's who Byrne is. Like, he's so convincing. But in actuality, Byrne is a ball of sunshine who rolls up in like these super cool 1960s coats, and it's just like the nicest man in the world. So based on the performance in this movie and who he actually is, like, I mean, obviously he's a freaking brilliant actor.
He's terrific. You mentioned some of your references for the film. Mauricio is asking about someone else. He says, how much do you consider yourself influenced by Hitchcock?
I mean, I think obviously just Hitchcock and Rear Window is built into the DNA of this movie. There's very obvious comparisons to Rear Window. And honestly, if there was any one particular big reason I was reluctant to do the movie, it's because I knew like those comparisons are there naturally, and you never want to set yourself up to be compared to Hitchcock, because that's just like a losing scenario. But I felt like, ultimately, like, the character of Julia and her journey sort of is unique, and I put a lot of myself in it. I know Maika put a lot of herself in it. So, but yeah, I mean, narratively, of course, Hitchcock is huge. And I would say, actually, even if I wasn't necessarily working specifically off of the visual language of Rear Window, I'm positive every single other filmmaker I was referencing Rear Window. So it's just like a couple degrees removed from Hitchcock at all times.
Carl, I don't know if you want to take this one. Ty asks, could Carl have taken The Watcher?
Carl, I don't know. I mean, I don't think Francis could, but no, I'm terrified of scary movies, to be honest. I'm the kind of guy that sort of like looks at the corner of the screen the whole time. Well, I guess it depends, like if the Watcher was coming for my dog or for my friend, then whether or not it was sort of like my undoing, I think I would try. But if it was a random stranger, I might run for the hills. I don't know. Byrne was incredible in the movie. I watched it last night, and gosh, I mean, just that scene on the subway, the climax, I just was thinking, God, I should have been more still in my whole performance, because Byrne is so solid. He's terrifying and magnetic. And he is a wonderful guy, but he makes a tremendous villain in this film. So I don't know. I'd have to see what happened at the moment.
That's fair. That's a fair answer.
Yeah.
Dana asks Chloe, did you always intend to end with Julia killing the Watcher? I have to admit, the film and Maika had me convinced that she was dead.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad we got away with that. And hopefully you're not questioning why she isn't actually dead of blood loss. But yes, that was always the intention. That was always built into the script. But I think the interesting thing that happened was the script that Maika and Carl were sent, and the script that we were working off of a week at least into production, the ending was a little different. There was no gun involved. I think Maika's character ends up, I think, stabbing Byrne somehow, and just the mechanics of it and how it physically happened was quite different. And I felt like it wasn't there. So I did a rewrite put a gun in the scripts, kind of pitched it I was terrified pitching it to the producers and then pitching it to Maika and Carl and Bird, being like, hey, I know we're like a week away, but what do you guys think about changing this ending? But they were all on board. And it was, a testament to all of them and to the producers for, having the courage to make a change that was actually pretty significant, like a week before we shot it.
Well, it's an amazing ending, and I feel like it's watching it. It's like a cathartic release to see, sort of that shift in fate. Because I have to admit that I was convinced it was going to end much differently a few minutes before as well. So it's an amazing choice, and you all did a beautiful job executing it. We have a question from Charles. Julia is in a unique position of being a stranger in a new foreign country, struggling to communicate her needs and fears. Was filming in Romania always the intention? What did filming in Romania allow you in terms of storytelling that other situations would not?
It was not always the intention, actually. Also, a big change was the script originally was set in New York City. And then, I think I said, I got hired in 2017. We did some development for a few years and had the sort of perilous path of indie filmmaking where it wasn't quite happening. And then I heard that they wanted to go shoot this in Romania. And I just decided to rewrite the script to take place there. And it ended up being such a creative blessing, actually, because it unlocked all these things. And I'd lived abroad and I'd felt what that was like. And I knew it was isolating. And, Maika had the same experience as well, I think. So it was something we connected on immediately. And what I sort of loved was like, all of us, like Maika, Carl, and I were living in this foreign country, and we were trying to work amidst a crew that was entirely local, and none of us spoke the language. And I just felt like there was kind of tension in a way in that always, and you have COVID on top of it, and I feel like that sort of lent itself to what we were trying to accomplish, artistically. So.
I mean, yeah, it must have been challenging, but we do have a related question for the cast, which was, what did you like most about filming in Bucharest?
Maika?
Well, I didn't really know what to expect. I had never been to Romania or to Bucharest. But I really fell in love with the city. I think a huge part of it was we got to film at so many cool locations, and I felt like pretty quickly I was able to see a lot of Bucharest, and then also the crew was absolutely incredible on this, and couldn't have done it without them. Like, yeah, so for me it was it definitely was challenging. There's a language barrier, and that is always hard, but it was like such a special experience. So
I mean, I love the fact that as an actor, we get the good fortune of traveling to a location to work. And inevitably, if you don't stay in your hotel room the entire time, which we were supposed to pretty much on this movie because of COVID, but if you don't, you get to meet people who are from completely different walks of life. That's always a gift. Bucharest is a very unique looking city with some really, I mean, like any city, has interesting people and characters populating it. But also we got an opportunity one weekend to go to Bram's castle, where, which is the inspiration for Dracula. And that was pretty cool. I mean, Maika, we had a good time there. That was cool.
that was quite cool, I will say.
And it felt fitting too, because we have the little Dracula figure in the movie.
It's true.
Yeah, there he is. And we got to go to where that guy was imprisoned. It was amazing.
We have a question from Maika, from Christopher. This isn't your first film involving being followed. Do you see any parallels from this and your performance in It Follows?
Man, today I was doing press and someone brought that up. They were like, is this the adult grown-up version of it's not the same, but there's similar maybe qualities to it. And yeah, I don't know. I guess It Follows was I feel like there was a real change happening in the genre at the time when It Follows came out. It was like The Witch and Babadook and yeah, I guess maybe I connect with the stories differently because I was man 22 when I did that, and now I don't know, like the relationship with Francis in this and like being in a relationship and having a person that yeah, I don't know, it's yeah, I don't know. But there are definitely things that I brought from that maybe into this and thought about, so yeah.
I think we have time for just one last question. I'd love to go back to Chloe, to something that you mentioned briefly, but I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about, which is just this world in which a woman's experience is not being believed. I think something that's really smart about the film is, not only Frances, but the policeman, nobody is really malicious. They're just not hearing her. Can you sort of talk about like how you wanted to explore that in the film?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like you said, hopefully no one's twirling their mustache and just is like a super villain about it. It's more just for me the fact that men's experience is different than women's experience. Their experience of being in the world is a little different. And I think when you grow up and you have the totality of, even everyday little exchanges where you're a little bit patronized or where people kind of doubt your credibility or think that you're overreacting in some ways, and you get that over and over and over again, something that may seem kind of small and inconsequential to someone else, like I think we're really attuned to picking up on when there is something there that is, a little bit passive aggressive or even just aggressive. And I think that is something that I've felt, and certainly I'll say working as either a first time director maybe, or probably more so a female director, I've experienced some level of doubt, and it is part of the job in some ways, but I think that maybe women in this industry have to deal with a tiny bit more bullshit than other people. So I think that just, in a way, I think the movie is weirdly about that particular experience and the frustrations that come with it. So yeah, I mean, it even though it's like a very classic kind of simple minimalist suspense story that we've seen a lot, it was also a weirdly very personal movie on that particular level. So.
It's beautifully expressed in the film. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have. Thank you, Chloe and Carl and Maika, for joining me to talk about Watcher. Thank you all for watching from home. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Acura, as well as all my colleagues at Sundance for making this online Q&A and this entire online festival happen. If you would like to rewatch this Q&A, a link to the recording will appear on the film page in our festival program guide. Once again, thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your festival.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.